Hey guys, this is Hector from the Insert Name FC podcast here to tell you guys about Canadips. It is a great tasting, superior alternative to traditional dip using CBD in a way that is radical, enjoyable, and effective. It comes in 5 core flavors: wintergreen, mint, citrus, mango, and American spice. Canadips CBD is the new evolution in dip, allowing guys to enjoy great, long-lasting taste without the downsides. If you guys want to go ahead and try them out, use the code BELLYUP20 at CanadipsCBD.com. Once again, BELLYUP20 at CanadipsCBD.com, and you'll get yourself 20% off your purchase. Thank you again for Canadips for being a great partner of Belly Up Sports. MLS Onside, Episode 6, The Window. Clubs go hunting for new talent in the summer transfer window where deals get done or fall apart, and stars arrive in the month-long frenzy. Look, it's not crazy to say this, but at this point, MLS has always tried to lure big names, and I think the episode was a little bit reaching when they were saying that Messi is what started the path. I think that's a bit of a stretch. I think this all goes back to, and I'll even say before MLS, NASL. You go and get Pele. We talked about the New York Cosmos last time a little bit. They kind of dug themselves to a really deep hole because of them trying to go after some of the best players in the world at that time, and obviously a lot of Brazilians. But I mean, it worked, just not so much on the finances side, but it worked. And I think that's always been the thing for America. Is like, how do we lure the big name? And obviously, you go back to that LA Galaxy team that brought in David Beckham, and I feel like that's really where it all started, because then you got Thierry Henry with Red Bull New York. You got David Villa, even though maybe not the best name to use right now, but NYCFC. And then the list goes on and on. I mean, maybe not all the sexiest names out there, but I thought it was pretty cool to say that we had a Matuidi even here in the MLS. A guy, something any other guy would know about. So I think honestly it starts off with Beckham when it comes to MLS.
I agree. That's the point I was going to make. Was I think a player of a person, not even a player, just a person of Messi stature coming through the league, David Beckham, easily. I think that, look, anybody who's like, nah, this is not even close, brother, you got to remember that Facebook was like 3 years old when Beckham came through the league. Like, could you imagine if social media was as fully fledged out as it is today, fully scaled up as it is today? It's not, bro. Beckham was a Hollywood A-lister through and through. There were tons of people, not even soccer fans, just people in America who knew who he was, that I'm sure didn't even know he was a footballer. Like they just recognized him through his modeling or through his wife being a Spice Girl, or like whatever the case may be. The guy was universally known as a brand, right? So Messi too, but again, I don't think Messi was necessarily as prominent outside of what he did on the pitch as Beckham was, right? Like he was everywhere, literally. So again, just different eras. You can't really compare them, but that was the entry point. We've seen a ton of very prominent European stars in MLS prior to Messi's arrival. I think the coolest part about this, though, is that they are right about one thing changing when Messi got here, and that's just the type of talent that MLS has attracted, right? Look at who's the young player Miami had? Gomez, right? Angel Gomez, I think it was, who went on to Brighton right afterward, right? And I had, creator friends in the UK asking me, like, hey, who's this Gomez kid? Like I saw he really wasn't part of Miami before then. Like, what happened? This is the type of talent. We're almost kind of reverse engineering it now through Messi. And that's, to me, what's been the most impressive part. But I see what they're doing, bro. They got to glaze Messi whenever they can, just like the league does. And at the end of the day, they're not totally wrong. It's just, again, there's an also pretty big entry point through Beckham.
No, yeah, for sure. And so, like I said, this episode's mainly focused on like general managers and obviously the transfer window. And the reason why I maybe have overly hyped this episode going into this episode, even before watching it, is because I don't know what it is about me. I just love the strategy implemented by general managers, like how they're approached. Obviously, if you guys want to know about a little bit about my American sports background as far as my teams go, I am a Houston Astros fan. Jeff Lunau, who was a general manager mastermind who fixed the farm system for the Astros and then made them the team that they were that ended up winning, 2 World Series, one under his belt and one after, he got fired because of the whole cheating scandal. And now he got FC Cancun a trophy for in the Liga MX, the second division. Obviously, they can't get promoted. Because no one talks about how Mexico has a closed system, but and also is the president of Leganes. So, and
It's
I
crazy,
mean,
right?
little controversy happened there with Real Madrid, but hey, if it ain't controversy, it ain't La Liga. So,
What a jab. I like that.
but yeah, so GMs, I've always been intrigued on like the whole strategy and how they approach because there's both like I think the beauty about this game and kind of similar to baseball, there's more multiple ways of building a strong team. Whether it's you build through the farm system, maybe suck for a very long time, three straight 100 plus lost seasons. That's it. That's all I gotta say. Um, then draft pick after draft pick, and then building what was considered one of the best or contradicting or maybe conflicting dynasties in Houston's history. But at the same time, like I like the strategy, go after the big names or go and develop players. I think it's all interesting in that aspect. I mean, one of my favorite movies is Moneyball, and so much as I don't want to say I like this movie, Draft Day is kind of interesting to me.
I
Even
was
though
gonna say that this man watched Draft Day before he watched this episode of Onside. Holy.
and this that movie stinks, but I like it. I don't know why. That the plot is terrible.
Yeah,
It's
it's kind of movie cheesy too, like Disney movies, to an extent. Disney real life movies, you know what I mean? Like we're just like that would never happen.
there's no way that would happen.
There's no world where that actually happens. Yeah, Draft Day is one of those movies, 100%, bro.
Yeah, so but yeah, so
But
like
I go ahead.
no, yeah, but yeah, so like the general manager position or sporting director position, I think is one that I find really intriguing because you can go multitude of ways. You can either just say F the coach, I'm gonna do what I want to do, or you collaborate with the coach, or sometimes you have teams that like Peter Vermees, who was also the general manager of Sporting Kansas City. And I mean, it's not always bad. I mean, as someone that you know, Wolverine memes Dominic Kinnear now at this point in my life. Uh, that guy was the general manager and coach of the Dynamo for a lot of the good years, and then stupid Matt Jordan joined, and then since then, it is what it is. But
Yep.
but yeah, like I mean, we've seen multitude of ways, but obviously, I overly hyped this episode because of my intrigue with general managers or sporting directors. Jose, how did you? Were you the general manager position? Does that anything ever intrigue you in any way about that one?
Yeah, bro. I would say I didn't let this bias, this expectation go into me watching it, but I will say that like a dream job. As someone who very much enjoys strategizing behind the scenes in sport, like that would be a dream position, like a dream role career wise. Because I'm not a coach, right? Like a lot of people who say GM's like a dream job, it's because they know they're not coaches. I was a former player, but I'm not a coach. I know that right off the bat. My personality is not that way. Um, a GM would be a dream job, man. So, but again, I didn't let that factor in. I tried to watch, and I kept telling myself the whole way through, this is just so surface level. This is so. You saw one call between the coach and the GM of Charlotte. You saw him kind of explaining the role more so than him actually doing the role. And I don't know, man. I guess maybe again, maybe we're not the target fan base for this series to an extent. Because I feel like as the episodes have gone on up to this point, we've gotten a little more critical of them.
Hmm.
This is purely for the person who doesn't understand maybe one, the hierarchy of professional soccer as far as like career goes, but two, even just professional sports. It felt like it was dumbed down for the person who is truly a casual on all levels. That's not a bad thing, but as someone who really like you, Hector, wanted to see just the ins and outs, what's it like to be a fly on the wall for some of those conversations? We just didn't really get that. It didn't, like I said before we went on air tonight, like I thought maybe scripted, but now that I think about it a little bit more, it just, they kept it very, very surface level and focused more so on the stories around the players that were being targeted, which I can see why they went in that direction. But as someone who was, yeah, looking to get a little bit behind the scenes, kind of like we get through a hard knock series on draft day or like whatever the case may be, phone calls getting made, a war room scene if possible. Yeah, man, didn't get really any of that, none of that strategizing. Got one team meeting in there where there was some really weird quote thrown out by the GM that he referenced it his dad said or something, Zoran. And that's really it. Like it was, and Dean Smith kind of disagreeing with it a little bit. But that's all we got, bro. That's all we got. I was like, all
Yeah.
right,
Yeah, because
I
I
don't know.
mean, and obviously the Charlotte FC is definitely going to be the focal point, but we do have LAFC and LA Galaxy featured on this, and those teams, you didn't have Thornton reaching out to Cherundolo. That would have been hilarious just to hear that interaction because Thornton seems to be like a bro in some sense. I think that's what I got the vibe from him, and obviously Cherundolo is I don't know. I have no idea what this guy is. Like he's interesting. I would have you talk about obviously with goals you guys have Eric Winalda. I would love some Cherundolo stories from that guy to because I think I get a better grasp of who
Yeah.
Cherundolo really is because I like in his press conferences. I mean he's very just complains. He's naggy. That's what I'm getting
Mm,
from it. But then obviously LA Galaxy is also featured in this episode as well. But the thing is that what I think people don't maybe if you don't understand the transfer window, especially like MLS standpoint, there is a challenge, and that is that January transfer window. You have literally a month to try to figure out who you want to get, bring into this team to come in and do the whole preseason training and get gel with the team. Ideally, this is where you would want to bring your marquee DPs or designated players for people that don't know what DP means. And it's kind of hard because especially if you're trying to get a guy from that's playing currently in Europe, they're in mid-season. They're either competing for a cup title or maybe, obviously hope maybe they're still in the Champions League conversation. So it's really hard to get these players in January because of the fact that hey, I'm competing for a cup. Like
mhm.
for instance, not Real Madrid, the Houston Dynamo when they were trying to get Hector Herrera, they couldn't get Hector Herrera in January because he was with Atletico Madrid. Atletico Madrid had hopes that they could win La Liga. And I think they did win La Liga that year. So Ache they couldn't get him until the summer transfer window, which I think maybe obviously easier to get these players, but I think the interesting factor that comes in with the summer transfer window is like the second wind, right? Like maybe your team's in a promising position in as far as playoff seeding goes. You add in that big home run designated player, and now you're in a very stronger playoff position. So the strategy
Yeah.
with the transfer window in MLS, it's different, but I think it's intriguing as a GM of how you strategize and how you prioritize these transfer windows.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think January is hard for everybody, right? That's the first thing, right? I think for those who don't understand how the transfer windows work, it is important to understand that January is difficult for MLS teams, but it's also difficult for anybody overseas for the reasons Hector listed, and just because at the end of the day, clubs at the same time, if you're on path for something, you've obviously made a goal for yourself at the beginning of each season. If you're on path to reach those goals, to let go of a pivotal piece in the middle of the season is usually going to just require a lot. And not that clubs wouldn't give these players up, right? Is that can MLS actually offer something in January that would convince a club to let that player go? Because you do in January, you'll almost always, unless it's a player who's not on the same page with their manager, maybe forcing their way out, or again, just not a pivotal piece in that side, more of a depth player. Maybe those targets are a little bit easier, more low hanging fruit. And that way, it's not quite as expensive. But usually, to pry a pivotal player from a club's hands requires a lot more money in January than it does in the summer when they have time to backfill that player to replace them in some way, at least numbers wise. Um, and therefore a little less expensive. So summer's always the biggest window, by far. And we'll follow it this season at Major League Soccer with Griezmann as a perfect example. Griezmann still debating whether or not he's going to come to MLS, but every fan, especially those LAFC fans, are ready for him to kind of make a decision as the summer nears. And I'm sure they're wanting some reinforcements this season, and he could be that for them, right? And that's a whole different talking point. But yeah, bro, this I think this episode of Onside did a pretty good job of getting that point across, and then also on the same time highlighting a couple targets that these teams are all going after. You had two teams in one big market in LA, LAFC and the Galaxy fighting for their own targets. LAFC kind of locking up Giroud pretty early. They established that really early in the episode. And then Charlotte FC versus the Galaxy kind of locking horns over Marco Reus. And that's really how it played out. Remember, Hector, we were all following that shit last season, had no idea where Reus was going to end up being. But we all kind of figured, right? Like, I feel like when LA comes calling and you're coming from Europe, I'm not sure how attractive life in suburban East Coast is really going to be.
No, yeah, and I think that I think I love how that's how they set it up with this episode where you have LAFC already, it was, and I think it very much was a very effortless. There was no real like discussions to try to get Olivier Giroud into LAFC. I think where he is at in his career, where his point is with AC Milan, like he just wasn't part of their future plans. Why not come to MLS? Why not go to LA? And I'm sure LA was the destination that he wanted to go to anyways, and gets to play for LAFC, has the little press conference. And at that point, LAFC in a very prominent position to win the Western Conference, which that's what they actually ended up doing. Maybe not because of Olivier Giroud, just because the team is built already fairly well.
Definitely
Um,
not because of Giroud.
Definitely not because of Giroud, but and I think that kind of builds the pressure for the Galaxy, where a team that I think many people feel that for last year was built fairly well, and maybe they're just like, well, we got to compete with these guys. We need to go get ourselves our home run hitter, at least what we're hoping it to be, and who knows what were their options? I would have loved to have seen like maybe them talking like who could we try to lure, and then maybe they're like, hey, you know what? Roos and the rumors were Roos does want to come to MLS. Like MLS was where he wanted to end up going after leaving Borussia Dortmund for so many years. And I mean, guys, I'm gonna be honest with you. The days of a player playing for one club for their whole life, that's gonna be a unicorn at this point because let's face it, a lot of these guys come from, South America, or they come over, so they're obviously not going to be a one club guy. But I think it is interesting to see his story at least, and then yeah, I think Marco Rose was a lot of teams were interested in Marco Rose. Not only was it Charlotte FC, but and LA Galaxy, but I believe St. Louis was also in the conversation of going to get the German.
What a
But
what a jab at St. Louis, by the way. Didn't even factor them into the
it
conversation for this episode. Said, fuck it, it's just Charlotte and the Galaxy.
And I'm like, it wouldn't have been that hard because you were already interviewing the director for St. Louis. Like how you couldn't just I mean you randomly had Pat Noonan share his thoughts on on Kevin Sullivan. I mean, it would have been easy like, yeah, we were trying for him, but he just really didn't want to be here. Like even if you gave that, like you made it seem like it was just these two teams that were going out. No, there was other teams that were mu very much in the race. And I mean, Zoran kind of mentioned it. Zoran, aka Z. Um, I think he was very interesting. I actually really liked Zoran
I
because
do too.
it's the agent turned GM, Maybe in Europe or overseas, maybe that's unique. But like obviously here in the we got what Todd McShay, GM of the well, I guess he's not an agent, but an analyst being the GM of the Las Vegas Raiders. I think the Lakers have Kobe's old agent now. He's the GM, Rob
Hmm.
Pelinka. I
Yep.
think he's the GM for the Lakers. So shoot, we've had guys on TV that become head coaches. Like it to us is not outside the norm, but I think being an agent and understanding how the discussions go with sporting directors and players, I think could be an asset. And I think it's intriguing that he decided like I want to be a GM out of nowhere. After representing guys like Drogba, to be
Yeah.
like, hey, I want to try to make an MLS contender.
Yeah. I think Zoran Z is a legacy guy. I really do. I think he you don't take a job halfway to a place that you've never heard of halfway across the world as the first GM ever in the club's history without being like some sort of an ambitious legacy guy, right? And I think with Z, man, I liked him too. I think he the way he talked, the way he explained what the position is, why he felt like you said he was a great fit for the role, right? He had this, this long-standing agent career, working directly with players hand in hand, and a lot of those skills transfer directly to the roles of a sporting director or a GM, right? The other part is the strategy part, the long-term part, having a vision for what you want the team to look like in 5, 10 years, not just what's it look like this season, next season. That's the hard part that I think a lot of GMs still get wrong consistently. And of course, we didn't get those insights, right? Because Charlotte's still very much a new expansion club. But I think that based on, again, right, we heard them say it in the episode, the way he convinced Dean Smith to be the new manager after Dean initially told him no. The way he convinced veteran Ashley Westwood, who spent 10 plus years in the Premier League, to do the same thing Dean did, right? Or even that he did and move halfway across the world for this opportunity. So, so yeah, I mean, I think all in all, he's probably in the exact role he needs to be in for that club to help them get where they want to go. And I would say it's working out well. If you watch the episode, you know that Royce was in a tug of war, I guess you could say, between the Galaxy and Charlotte FC. Ultimately opted for the bigger market, despite it being the lower offer. And Hector, we talked about it before the show, man. I feel like as much as I'm sure he took it as a huge L, and bro, I can only imagine, right? Like that is your target, probably your biggest or your lone target for the entire summer. Your entire strategy is built around this one guy, and he takes the lower offer, right? You have the most competitive offer in the market, and he accepts the lower one. I can only imagine what that must have felt like. With that said, though, um, I think he won, bro. I think at least as of today, at least we sit here and talk where Giroud's the next to nothing for LAFC. Royce, same thing, and not just for the Galaxy, and not just that, but Zoran, he went out and didn't make it a complete failure of a summer, right? Went out and got Tim Ream. A lot of people thought that might have been redundant because Charlotte FC proved to be a good defensive team last season, but he still is shoring them up in the back, right, with all of his experience. And then from there, right, made a good decision going out to get Wilfred Zaha, who I believe is an infinitely better attacker than either Royce or Giroud. And so many GMs, I think what people don't talk about is so many GMs panic in moments like that, right? Think about it. Your entire plan is Marco Royce. He leaves. You have built up the fan base. There's so many rumors going out from Bogert and every other fan journalist out there around Royce potentially choosing Charlotte, and then he doesn't. And then this fan base feels kind of let down. I think there's so many GMs, especially newer ones, who would decide, you know what? Let's quickly pivot. Let's go to someone else. Get a sexy name. I don't care who they are. Let's sign them up. And they didn't.
And that's
He,
how you
it
get
just,
Cuauhtémoc Blanco. And that's how you end up with a Cuauhtémoc Blanco.
But bro, think about it. Even if you translate this to the Premier League, it's like every Arsenal fan is an example, screaming on Twitter about Arteta and the front office not making moves, when in reality, those who panic end up sacrificing much more in the long term than they do in the short term, aka Manchester United. And so
I
and
mean,
their
if
way
you
to
want
get
to think about like panic moves for Arsenal, like I mean, there was a point that Arsenal was just known for their panic moves. I mean,
yeah.
Mkhitaryan.
Bro, like so many types of players over the years, you're like, you know what? They were probably the hot name at some tournament, and we just decided to drop a bag on them, and it didn't work out. That's such a tale as old as time. So I think where Zoran showed that he's maybe a sound GM, we didn't get a lot of insights there. It kind of just briefly showed when they missed out on Royce that, oh hey, by the way, still got somebody. Here's Tim Ream. You just saw the jersey, his name and number on it. That's pretty cool. But I thought that was a big deal. Like you guys still had I would say of the three teams they featured in this episode, the best transfer window. They did. Might not have been the
Yeah,
sexiest
that
name,
that whole
but they
Andrew
won it.
Weeby sound clip, sound bite, whatever that. Fuck you. And so I was just look. I love Andrew Weeby. He's a passionate guy, and no offense to him. It's just like the losers. Really, that was the loser. Like, I mean, yes, Tim adding another defender, but you're talking about a vocal leader in the back line. I don't think many people would say no to that. And that's just my honest opinion on that part. Um, but yeah, I think to me, like, yes, at the end of it, in that moment, and you're correct. Hindsight's always 2020. You look back at it now, you got Wilfred Zaha, an actual forward. No offense to Marco Rose, but he's kind of like what, a 10 or a winger, depending
Mhm.
on how you want to how
Very
you view him
versatile.
now. Um, whereas Charlotte and you and me were always saying it during last season. I was like, this team needs a striker. They just need to go get
Hmm.
themselves a guy that can score the goals. While they have this amazing defense, and we kept saying it like, oh, go make sure you guys go get somebody. And yeah, it was unfortunate they didn't go get the guy. But aside from that, they were still a very good defensive unit, and that's why they were able to still make a push for the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, who knows if they would have had that nine, different story. I don't know if Reus would have completed that Charlotte team, and I think, like you said, they dodged a huge bullet with him, especially if you saw Reus just staring at a goal happening in that one LA Galaxy. He's been checked out. I think very much checked out. There's no pride in him right now. Obviously he got mad at MLS because he was trying to figure out how we're losing players when we're a championship team. I get it, but and I think it's crazy that they took the agent took, well, I guess not the agent, but Rose chose a lesser deal because of the destination.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I can see why someone would do it at any point in their career, right? It's like family. I want my family to be happy. I want them to be super comfortable. I want them to have a great first experience in America, whatever that may be, right? I understand that piece. I agree with you. He might be checked out. I don't know why. I don't know why he would. I mean, winning a chip in your first year has something to do with it. Um, but yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, one thing a lot of people missed who may have watched this episode already is that at the end of the day, every one of these three signings that were referenced, Giroud, Marco Reus, and Tim Ream, they were all depth pieces in reality. Like Will Kuntz said it for the Galaxy himself. When they thought about adding someone to the mix, they thought about veteran leadership. They thought about somebody who could take the load off with how many games they had coming up, and the level wouldn't drop, right? Like he talked about Royce like a depth player. The GM, I can't remember his name, you mentioned earlier, from LAFC, who talked about Giroud.
Oh,
He mentioned,
Thornton.
yeah, he mentioned how like a team, would he rather have a team with or without Giroud, whether he played a ton of minutes or not? He feels like a championship team would rather have Giroud. And which leads me to believe that like he doesn't know what kind of role he was supposed to have, but at his age, maybe being the guy week in and week out is not feasible. And then you have Tim Ream, which we all know, right? How seasoned he is, right? How much of a veteran he is. I would argue he's had more minutes than either one of those two guys and been more consistent on the pitch when getting those minutes. So yeah, man. I mean, like I said, they were all depth pieces. At the end of the day, the LA market teams just ended up signing sexy names, and therefore they look like they won the transfer window. And from MLS's perspective, with how young we are as a league, that is winning to an extent, right? Like you got to put asses in seats, bro. I mean, that is winning. But at the same time, right? And while Galaxy might have lifted their chip as it wasn't due to Royce, I think they could have won it without him.
He wasn't
But
even
you
on.
know.
He wasn't even starting. So
Exactly. Yeah. So they could have won it without, in my opinion. Maybe he contributed a little bit off the bench as an impact player. I didn't watch every Galaxy game last season, but I can confidently say like Tim Ream is an established piece of Charlotte's back line. And by being a little more patient, I think, despite the L, I think Zoran came away with a W in this one.
no, yeah, for sure. But I think I think the only concern that I have now for MLS heading, going forward is just that my concern now is, are these players that obviously aren't very familiar with America? And I mean, let's be honest, anybody outside of America, and I can even say this for someone that has a lot of family in El Salvador, when they think of America, they think of LA, New York, and Miami. Like
Yeah.
they think of those places. They don't know about a Kansas. They don't know about uh I'm trying to think of another like kind of peculiar place. I don't want to say Missouri again, but like basically, like they don't know what other things have to offer, the unique cultures. And I think it's funny, like for instance with the Houston Dynamo, I think it's funny seeing them like learn about what throwing up the H means. Like these guys, and then all of a sudden, that's all you see these guys do from that from for the rest of the time. Every time they post a picture, like they love it. They just like, hey, this is cool. You know,
That's crazy, bro. That's
uh,
actually, I mean, it's a good point though.
it's funny as hell. Like, I mean, Achi still throws up the H. I think it's funny as hell. Like,
Reps it till he dies, bro.
Yeah, like I mean when he did his intro to Toluca, he literally threw up the H's. He's ever since like this guy's from Houston. Next thing you know, he's got the double cup, the double cup and some blades on his rims.
That's crazy,
Got
bro.
some
I
swangers.
mean, yeah, Houston has that impact. I think he got a lasting effect on players that walk through 100%, bro.
But and so my concern obviously at this point is like how many of these players that you know what? Hey, you know what? I'm gonna go play in the MLS. How many of them are going to be turned off by the opportunity of playing for Toronto, turned off by the idea of playing for a Kansas City or even
Bro,
a Colorado?
they wouldn't be turned off if they just knew what happens in those cities. You know why no one knows anything about Charlotte? Because I'll be honest, bro, there's just not that much content coming out of Charlotte. There's some creators who are doing stuff. There's some, studio or I should say networks who are covering Charlotte FC to an extent, right? But like this league just needs a lot more PR, and Messi was the start of that. But we got to start getting market specific, bro. There's just not enough stories being told from any one of these smaller market teams to make them stand out when these other players are looking for a spot to play. Like, bro, I'm still mind blown. This is not like a giant name. I don't think many MLS fans knew who this was before he came to MLS, but I'm mind blown that Pitar Musa is playing for Dallas. I really am. He was literally 24 years old at Benfica, coming off the bench, but like still still playing in first team games. And this man in his prime decided to come to Dallas. I was like, that's weird. That's just
No,
weird.
I get those things, and I think that I think I'm trying to think about when we did. I think it was when we picked like team players that we could see come to the MLS.
Yeah.
I feel like was Zaha featured on that or
Yeah.
no
Hmm.
was it was Zaha was.
We had Zaha on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I featured I think one of the Yewu brothers that I think I threw up one of their names. I think the
Yeah.
one that plays in Crystal Palace, and I was just like, he's a guy that if you know the Prem, you know this guy is good for some must watch TV on the occasion, things like that, and it's like obviously the thing is they're trying to go find a David Beckham when in reality there's only one David Beckham, just like there's only one Lionel Messi. Like
Yep.
it to me, it'd still be funny as hell the idea of Cristiano Ronaldo in Kansas City.
That
But
bro,
like,
that would have been amazing. Just watching him step off the plane to experience Kansas for the first time would have been, or Kansas City for the first time would have been amazing. I would have paid
he would have thought
actual
he
money
was
for
in the
that.
state of Kansas.
Dude walked in a Wizard of Oz or some shit. Like I would have loved to have seen the look on his face. I would have paid good money to see it. 100%.
And I think that to me was like, okay, he picked not a known market, Like, like I said, not many of these guys in Europe know about Kansas City. I'm sure they don't know anything about Tech Nine. Like, like like I'm
Hey, but
sure
he has some bangers though.
like I'm sure I mean he did drop a World Cup the Kansas City World Cup song.
Makes
That's
sense.
a
Honestly, I didn't even know that, but like I know Tech Nine has some bangers in general. But anyway, neither here nor there.
It's part of my Get Hype playlist.
Hell
Um,
yeah.
I mean, like Chicago might be one that everyone knows about because of Michael Jordan. Um, like, but as far as outside of that, it's New York, Miami, and LA. I don't know if there's any other regions, and I think that's gonna suck if that's gonna be something that holds back a lot of these MLS teams because maybe the player's like, no, I want to play for LA. I think that this episode was okay. It wasn't terrible. Like I said, I overhyped it myself just because of the fact that like GMs, I just want more in-depth GM stuff, and I think I still got like a little bit out of it. But I think for someone that doesn't understand like transfer windows, I think it's very educational. I think it was very educational. I think you can leave with something knowing about this episode.
Yeah, yeah. Again, it's a good starting point to understanding like the role of that person in the club, the GM or the sporting director, how pivotal like these transfer windows really are to their job at the end of the day. Like they spend all year preparing for each of these two windows throughout the year. And if you get it wrong, it can cost you big. And getting it wrong doesn't mean just missing out on players, right? It means at the same time potentially signing a player who's a risk and may not work out for your club and spending that money, right? So it goes both ways. But yeah, man, I think all in all, not what last episode was by any means. I think last episode was, We talked about it. Go check it out. This one was better. I just wish they would have gone a little more in depth. I would have been okay with an extra 10 to 15 minutes of just fly on the wall conversations, just really understand how important, how much time these sporting directors have put into strategizing and figuring out a way to make their offer as compelling to their targets as possible. Just some of that stuff, but like outside of that, still a decent episode.
Who is that guy?